I'm not sure the Trump administration understands the cattle market. Thanks for joining me on the CommStock channel. I'm senior analyst Brian Grete, and boy, President Trump has really drawn the ire of the U.S. cattle industry, cattlemen, ranchers, the beef industry, you name it. He has really sparked a fire and kind of stirred the hornet's nest, so to speak. This all started on Wednesday when President Trump tweeted, or on Truth Social, made a comment that basically he's the reason that the cattle industry is doing what it's doing, that his tariffs were bold and they saved the industry and all that. And as you can see here, he pretty much took on the cattle ranchers head on and didn't hold back. Like I said, he's the reason that the cattle market is where it's at right now. He followed this up with this one on Truth Social, basically saying that the tariffs that he imposed are the only reason that the cattle market is where it's at, that he quote unquote saved it. So it is what it is. After that, on Wednesday, the Trump administration released its grand scheme to rebuild the U.S. cattle herd and bring down beef prices, and mentioned it in the CommStock written report that there isn't much here, to be honest with you. This one leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I'll go through the key points of everything that the plan entails, but there's nothing there that's going to aggressively rebuild the U.S. cattle herd in a quick fashion. And honestly, that isn't possible. The cattle industry and the cattle herd takes a long time, and that's why there are cycles up and cycles down in terms of herd size and prices and everything else. Seemingly everybody within the cattle industry understands that, but the Trump administration doesn't. And so here's what the initiatives were in the plan that the Trump administration released. They're going to expand grazing. Excellent. Probably needed, and something that will help in the longer term for cattlemen. Something that's a short-term fix to the situation? Absolutely not. Predator and risk management controls. And I think that, once again, something that's needed, not something that's going to have a significant short-term impact. Boosting slaughter capacity and processing capacity. Yes. Absolutely. And that is needed. It's been an initiative that USDA has undertaken, bringing on more medium and small sized meat processors. All that helps. It absolutely helps with the price and price discovery process within the cattle industry. But once again, not a short-term fix to the situation that the Trump administration apparently feels is so necessary to address. Labeling and market transparency. Absolutely. Product of the USA is now a more strict guidelines in terms of getting that labeling on the product, but that isn't going to increase the supply of USA produced beef anytime soon. That it's just a labeling issue. The price transparency, absolutely all for that one. That needs to happen, and should have happened a long time ago. But there needs to be more transparency within the pricing structure there. Innovation and technology, yes, absolutely. Continue to evolve that portion within the industry. And then finally, the building of demand, and the steps that USDA laid out in its action plan suggests that, more going into school lunches and the dietary guidelines and stuff like that for eating beef and consuming beef, and terrific, but it doesn't do anything to really address the situation that apparently the Trump administration thought was the issue, and that was that the cattle herd is at the smallest level it's been at in decades. That isn't going to be fixed overnight. And that consumer beef prices are high, and that isn't going to be fixed overnight either. On the beef price thing, the White House also announced that it will quadruple imports of Argentine beef, go from the current 20,000 metric ton tariff rate quota to 80,000 metric tons of tariff rate quota there. Not a big deal at all. It is a small portion of what is imported into the United States, and even a much smaller portion of what is consumed here domestically each year. And so we consume about 13 million metric tons of beef, and we're talking about increasing the tariff rate quota to 80,000 metric tons. So just a small percentage of really what the beef consumption is here in the United States. All that did was really draw the ire of the cattle industry. Cattlemen are riding a high wave at the moment. They don't want Argentine beef to tip the apple cart, so to speak, within the industry and cause prices to come down. Now, cyclically, that is going to happen eventually. And that's the part that I think that the Trump administration doesn't understand, is that commodity markets, and in particular the cattle market, are very cyclical. And so you will see these periods where the herd is small, numbers are low, your beef production reduces as a result, and you get the swing up in prices, currently trading near record levels in both live cattle and feeder cattle futures, near record levels in beef, wholesale and retail beef prices. And you get that within the cyclical nature of the cattle market. As the herd is rebuilt, which is not a short process, takes 2 to 3 years to even start to see the results of that, then you start to increase your cattle numbers, which eventually increases your beef numbers and all that. But as you start that process and heifers are retained for breeding purposes, you actually reduce your beef supplies. And so that's why this is a longer term process, one that quite honestly the Trump administration, it wouldn't matter what they do, wouldn't be able to solve just with some grand scheme of things. Really, all this has done is it's laid out a plan for what they think should happen as we move forward, making advances within the industry to make it easier and more profitable and more transparent and all those types of things as we move forward. Great. That is great, but it's not going to magically rebuild the U.S. cattle herd. And the steps they are taking to reduce beef prices aren't going to dramatically improve that situation for consumers either, in my opinion. And I think that from a demand perspective, the key thing that we've seen here is that the U.S. consumer has continued to buy U.S. beef despite the high prices. And until that changes, we will see the beef demand hold up relatively well given the price situation. With all that said, the bottom line here is that I'm not sure the Trump administration understands the cattle market or commodities in general, for that matter. For the CommStock channel, I'm analyst Brian Grete.
Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.